The government-issued marriage license is not the same as the marriages recognized by a religion. A marriage license is a document issued by a state authority which authorizes a couple to marry. Under Christianity, for example, marriage is a lifelong relationship between a man and a woman ordained by God. Clearly, the Christian marriage definition was just a generality, as there are 2 billion Christians and probably just as many definitions of marriage under Christianity. Clearly, marriage differs in the Bible, throughout the Bible. Some Christians today believe that same-sex marriage is okay. Some Christians today believe that interracial marriage today is not okay. And some Christians probably believe that polygamy is moral today. So, do you see the difference between a religious marriage or a marriage under Christianity and the marriage as recognized by a government? If you don't agree, you're basically saying a marriage requires a government to make it official, which is absurd. Or you're saying that a marriage requires a belief in a God to make it official, which is also absurd. Kim Davis, why don't you just do your job and issue state-recognized relationships? You don't have to accept or believe that God recognizes those marriages, but you do have to accept that the government does, as that is your job, to issue state-recognized relationships. In 1967, laws against marriages between interracial couples were deemed unconstitutional. A county clerk who's a Christian could have done exactly the same as you are doing right now. That clerk could say, I believe God made the races separately, to not mix. Interracial marriage is against God's law, and I am under God's authority to not issue licenses to whites trying to marry Negroes. In fact, they probably did do that back then, 48 years ago. Loving v. Virginia in 1967 was a Supreme Court case that deemed bans on interracial marriages were unconstitutional. The trial judge of the case said the following, quote, Almighty God created the races white, yellow, black, Malay, and red, and he placed them on separate continents. But for the interference with this arrangement, there would be no cause for such marriages. The fact that he separated the races shows that he did not intend for the races to mix, unquote. So a judge acting as a representative of the state, based on his religion, believed the races were not supposed to mix. And it's funny how he said the fact that God separated the races. That's not even true. Meanwhile, in 2015, we have Kim Davis saying God's definition of marriage is a union between one man and one woman. So, we can replace references to race in the judge's statement to language about same-sex marriages, and they will basically say the same thing.
All you hear today are opponents of same-sex marriage talking about those, quote, 5 unelected judges or those 5 unelected lawyers.
Ted Cruz called the ruling illegitimate and lawless. He says they violated judicial oath. Quote, if someone wants to change the marriage laws in a state the way the Constitution allows, is to convince your fellow citizens. What we saw instead was 5 unelected judges saying the views of 320 million Americans don't matter because they're going to enforce their own policy positions, unquote. The reason why they say unelected judges is clearly meant to be an insult. People with views like Ted Cruz claim to love the Constitution. So let's go to the Constitution. Article 2, Section 2. It grants the President the power to appoint Supreme Court judges. So your constant usages of the term, quote, unelected judges, unquote, is to trick your sheep into being outraged about the current judges being there. Secondly, they bring up the number of judges to try again to anger their flock, because 5 is a small number compared to the 320 million.
So why are 5?
Deciding the fate of 320 million is basically what they're trying to say. However, the Constitution gives them the right to do so.
The right to interpret the Constitution.
And no, Ted, you don't need to vote to change the law. Marriage isn't even something we should be voting on in the first place. However, marriage is deemed a right. You have the right to marry. So, Ted, do you really want people to be able to vote on the rights of others? It took until 2000, the year 2000, for only 59% of Alabama voters to support interracial marriage. Think about that. 59% of the state of Alabama in the year 2000, only 15 years ago. So I guess you would have supported Alabama's right to deny interracial marriage if it actually happened that way. I doubt you would. Let's say the father of Rafael Cruz, who was your father, was an Alabama clerk in 1971 and denied marriage licenses to interracial couples. What will you have to say about that today, Ted Cruz? Let me guess, you'll do the typical Republican question dodging, right? I would agree. The view of 320 million Americans don't matter when it comes to their personal beliefs when we are talking about the rights of others. You can have 99.9% of Americans supporting the slavery of the 0.1%, but any laws supporting that would still be unconstitutional. That's what the Constitution is for. It is to protect the minority. I bet you agree with that, don't you, Ted? What if that 99.9% were Christians who believe slavery is moral because the Bible says so, and their God condones it according to the Bible? People have believed that in the past. Just go back to the South in 1860. And the Bible does, in fact, defend slavery, and it has their God condoning it. Take a look at Exodus 21, Leviticus 25, verses 44 to 46, Colossians 3, Ephesians 6, verses 5 through 9, and 1 Peter 2:18. Those are just a couple of examples of the Bible condoning slavery or the God condoning slavery. Would you still stand with them? Would you stand with them like you stand with Kim Davis? I'm guessing you either say no or avoid answering the question. So why do you support homosexuals not having the right to marry and defending such laws because people voted on it? Voting on the rights of others. Your position is contradictory. It's hypocritical. And by the way, 320 million don't stand with you, Ted Cruz. The majority of Americans, which is approximately 60%, don't agree with you at all. You have only about 35%. Should we vote on the rights of others now? The industrialized world is also laughing at us. They disagree with us. People like you are why they laugh at us. People like you they are ahead of us, and we are trying to get to where they are now and past them, but you are holding us back. The same-sex marriage ruling was 5-4 in favor of same-sex marriage. The only reason why the 4 opposed same-sex marriage is because of their religious beliefs. It's made obvious. There are literally no strong or sound arguments against same-sex marriage. I am waiting for anyone to try. Religion is the only factor separating those who believe that same-sex marriage should be legal and those that don't agree. Just ask them. Their best argument is their religious belief. And then those that don't say so bring up ridiculous arguments that are obviously unsound and invalid. The ruling for the interracial marriage case was unanimous. Interesting how there aren't any obvious verses in the Bible talking about interracial marriage and their relationships. However, there are clearly verses in the Bible against homosexuality. That is what really made all the difference between a 5-4 and a unanimous decision. Those 4 judges cared more about their own personal religious beliefs than their oath to uphold.
Than they did for their oath to the Constitution.
Just look at the dissenting judges' opinions. Roberts said the 14th Amendment doesn't apply to same-sex marriage because no prior decision had changed the core component of marriage, that it be between a man and a woman. Roberts says basically that no prior decision has changed it, therefore the Due Process Clause was not violated. That is utterly ridiculous. His reasoning is a fallacious appeal to tradition fallacy. It happened in the past or throughout the past, therefore that is true. That's a fallacy. Scalia said the court's decision robs the people of the liberty to govern themselves. The democratic process had been unduly halted. Scalia, you're a moron. In 1967, 18% of the people were in favor of legalized interracial marriage. Did the decision violate the democratic process back then? In 1967, it was 18% in favor of interracial marriage. In 2015, it is 60% in favor of same-sex marriages. Your argument is invalid. I guess you think legal interracial marriage, before the majority of people accepted it, was wrong. You think that violated the democratic process. Guess what? You don't vote on the rights of others. Your argument is ridiculous, unsound, invalid, and immoral. Thomas said basically the same thing, but he added that the decision threatens religious liberty. Okay, so did abolishing slavery, giving women the right to vote, and legalizing interracial marriage threaten religious liberty? There are religious arguments for all 3 of those things. There are religious arguments for slavery, and that's what the South used to defend slavery. There are religious arguments against women being able to vote, and there are religious arguments against interracial marriage. As people have signs today saying God is against same-sex marriage, 48 years ago in 1967, people held up signs saying interracial marriage is against God. Your argument is invalid, sir. Alito said in his argument that the Due Process Clause only protects rights that are deeply rooted in this nation's history and tradition. Yeah, so by your logic, abolishing slavery violated America's deeply rooted history and tradition. How dare they abolish slavery? Should be what you say right now today. That the deeply rooted history of this nation and the history of this nation was slavery up until it became abolished. He added that same-sex marriage bans promote procreation in the optimal childbearing environment. Okay, so by that logic, let's ban marriages for people that don't want kids, for the infertile, and for the elderly who can't reproduce. And to promote the optimal childbearing environment, let's ban single parents, from owning kids. And let's also ban divorce to make sure that that child has two parents. And in 1967, interracial marriage should have stayed banned, as the Society for Interracial Marriage did not work. The society was against them. That society wouldn't be an optimal childbearing environment. Really? Those are the opinions of the four dissenting judges? I'm 19 years old, and I easily can make a better argument in favor of same-sex marriage than they can make one against it. Clearly, they knew that they couldn't cite their religion as their reasoning against same-sex marriage, so they said ridiculous, nonsensical, illogical, and laughable garbage instead. Kim Davis said, even if a court strikes down a law, it cannot create a new statute. That must be done by the legislators. To issue a license to a person who is not authorized to receive it under the statute is a direct violation of law. Hey Kim, did you know that interracial marriage laws remain on the books after 1967? The last two states to remove the language were South Carolina until 1998 at 62%, and Alabama until 2000 at 59%. Similarly to Kim Davis, local judges in Alabama continued to enforce anti-interracial marriage laws until 1970, and the reason why they stopped was due to a ruling by a court, not by a new statute. It took until 2000, only 15 years ago, or 33 years after the ruling, for the racist state of Alabama to adapt its laws to the decision of the Supreme Court. 59% of the voters endorsed the law, casted by ballot, which removed the anti-interracial marriage laws from the state constitution. So, Kim, by your logic, any interracial marriages in those 33 years after 1967 through 2000 were invalid and should not be valid. I guess no one understood that, and no one understood the law at that time, but you finally figured it out.
After another 15 years after 2000.
In 2009, Keith Bardwell, a judge of the peace of Robert, Alabama, refused to sign a marriage license for an interracial couple. He is authorized by his state, just like Kim Davis, to issue marriage licenses. Ted Cruz, Mike Huckabee, and Kim, would you have defended that guy too? Bobby Jindal called for him to be fired, yet Bobby Jindal defends Kim Davis. He said it was a clear violation of the Constitution and federal and state laws. This shows the raging hypocrisy of the right, especially how they always claim to love the Constitution. Religious liberty isn't the right for an individual acting as a representative of the government to impose his or her personal beliefs on the people. Religious freedom is the right for an individual to have the right to practice his or her religion, their personal religion, not to impose it on others. This is not a Christian nation, and I am sick and tired of the right claiming that it is. Why would the Founding Fathers set up the United States as a Christian nation, or have laws based on the Ten Commandments if they wanted a nation of religious freedom? Half of the Founding Fathers were either disliking Christianity, despising Christianity, or weren't even Christians, or they were deists. They even say this isn't a Christian nation. Thomas Jefferson said, quote, Christianity is the most perverted system that ever shone on man, unquote. James Madison, who's the guy who wrote the Constitution, said, quote, religion and government will both exist in greater purity the less they are mixed together, unquote. Those are just two names. Other big names include Ben Franklin, John Adams, and Thomas Paine, who are some of the biggest known founding fathers. Damn those meddling facts, right? So, what oath did Kim Davis take? Section 228 of the Kentucky Constitution says, and this is the oath that they take. Quote, I do solemnly swear or affirm, as the case may be, that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this Commonwealth, and be faithful and true to the Commonwealth of Kentucky, so long as I continue a citizen thereof, and that I will faithfully execute to the best of my ability the office of County Clerk.
So help me God.
After reading that oath, it should be abundantly clear and obvious that she has violated that oath. The Constitution, which she took an oath to uphold, granted the Supreme Court the right to hear that case of Obergefell versus Hodges and determine the constitutionality of marriage laws that ban same-sex marriage. They determined that such statutes were unconstitutional, as they violated the 14th Amendment's Due Process Clause and Equal Protection Clause. The 14th Amendment says all persons born or nationalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States. And these are the two clauses. Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, and property without due process of law, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. Unquote. She has clearly violated her oath. She can disagree with same-sex marriage and with the Supreme Court's decision, but she must, as a government official, uphold the Constitution and comply with the court's ruling. Right-wingers, such as the Republican candidates Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, Mike Huckabee, Bobby Jindal, Rick Santorum, Marco Rubio, Jeb Bush, Scott Walker, and Ben Carson, are all supporters or somewhat neutral on where they stand on the Kim Davis issue. That they mostly swing to her side. Right-wingers and Republicans all claim to love the Constitution. Like I said before, the Constitution that they love so much gave the Supreme Court the right to determine the laws banning same-sex marriage were unconstitutional. The Constitution also says senators, representatives, members of several state legislatures, and all executive and judicial officers, both of the U.S. and of the several states, shall be bound by oath or affirmation to support the Constitution, unquote. If they love America and the Constitution, why are they in support of a bigoted woman who violated her oath and violated the Constitution? Why are you in favor of creating laws based on Christianity when the Constitution that you claim to love says you can't do so? You can't love this country or what it stands for by supporting her, talking about, quote, 5 unelected judges, or by trying to enact policy, laws, statutes, or amendments based on an establishment
Of religion.
Kim Davis, you are a public official. Your job is to act as a representative of the state which you hold public office. Your job is to give out marriage licenses in Rowan County, Kentucky. You took an oath to uphold that Constitution. Why are our tax dollars going into your pockets to do nothing, to not do your job, and refuse to do that job? Your job isn't to enforce your personal beliefs. Your job is to enforce and uphold the Constitution. Your rights have not been taken away. The rights of others have been taken away by your decision to not uphold the Constitution. You don't have the right, as a public official, to deny someone their rights without due process of the law. You don't have the right to deny people the equal protection of the law. The right you are denying is the right for same-sex couples
to marry.
The government operates by people, people like you who hold public office to represent the government. So the government cannot endorse laws or violate laws based on religious beliefs. So you, as acting as a representative of the government, which is the only way the government can work, must follow the Constitution and your oath. You have no objection to the Constitution and your oath. You cry about wanting a compromise so that you don't have to violate your conscience and religious conviction. In order for those marriage licenses to be valid, the county
clerk must sign them.
Instead of you signing them, since you refuse to do so, the deputy clerks have been giving out the licenses instead without your signature. This calls the validity of those licenses into question. This does nothing but cause legal issues that must be settled in court. You are essentially wasting taxpayer dollars on something that should be a non-issue. You have to sign those marriage licenses, even if you're not personally giving them out. You just do your job. Your job is to represent the people of your county. That includes the homosexuals and the non-Christians. You cannot just ignore a law because it violates your personal religion, while it takes away the rights of others. Imagine if we allowed government officials to ignore the laws based on their religion. There will be chaos. It's 1865. Sorry, Negroes. I know slavery was abolished by the 13th Amendment, but you're in a county of Alabama where the public officials believe in slavery. And they believe slavery is their right ordained by God. It's 1920, and women now have the right to vote, as defended by the 19th Amendment. Sorry, ma'am. I don't believe in women having the right to vote based on my personal interpretation of God's word, the Bible. Giving you a ballot would violate my conscience and my deeply held religious beliefs. So, do you see the chaos? Kim Davis, sign the marriage licenses or step down.
Those are your only options.
I sure hope there aren't any public officials in Kentucky who find giving out divorce decrees as a violation of his or her conscience or deeply held religious beliefs. Just remember, the applications for marriage licenses in your county are also applications for divorce decrees. So basically what I'm saying to you is stop being ignorant, hypocritical, immoral, hateful, and bigoted, and just do your damn job.
Do it! Just do it! So just do it! Just do it! I'm gonna wake up and work hard at it. Nothing is impossible. No, what are you waiting for? Do it! Just do it! Yes, you can! Just do it!